Hello, I'm your superhero critic, and I'll stay super as long as you stay awesome. And everyone's wondering, where has the superhero critic been? And the answer to that is moving. I finally got my own place, so I've been focusing on that. So I apologize if you haven't seen me in a month, but I still love you. That being said, today is Friday the 13th. So we are once again diving into some horror comics, where we are going to look at last year's episode's second issue of How I Spent My Summer Vacation, Friday the 13th. Can I help you?
I want to do the review.
What do you mean?
I mean, I want to do the review. You go do whatever it is you do when you're not filming.
Why?
Because I want to do the review. Don't ask questions.
Fine then. You want to do the review? Here's the script. I'll go in the hot tub.
Were you in a bathing suit the whole time?
Yes?
Okay, then. Scripts. We don't need no stinking scripts. On the cover, we see Jason standing and staring menacingly at the viewer, surrounded by spiders. I really hope none of those are radioactive. I would have to call SuperHero Critic back in for a spider, Jason.
I'm not getting out of this hot tub.
Alright then, looks like I'm on my own. We open on a family ignoring a missing child alert and praying for more important things, like stopping Mexicans and gays from working their evil witchcraft whatever. And that's how to make me root for the machete-wielding maniac in 2 panels or less. Apparently, God is also annoyed by these people as he ignores their prayers and allows Jason to murder them. Back to Davy, who's been missing for 9 days, and in that time has gone completely feral and a bit insane. It seems he's also given in to a bad case of hero worship. Okay, there is a really big difference between standing up for yourself and mass murder, so maybe slow your roll a little bit there, Klebold. But of course, the kid doesn't see the problem with the killing spree, so he continues to eagerly follow Jason. The drug-addicted, morally bankrupt sheriff is back, and just in case you think for a second he might actually want to help, in less than a page he shows he's just there as another villain, wanting to kill Davy before the kid can tell the cops who really killed those counselors. Is everyone in this comic this horrible? Alright, maybe I was a little too quick to judge the mask. Going to the next page, we see a National Guard helicopter where the pilot is receiving a warning to be on the lookout for the very madman who is now holding a gun to his head. Sheriff, my dude, they already know you did it. Just go back and get your paid leave, you'll be fine. They spot Jason on the ground below, and the sheriff immediately grabs a huge gun and prepares to carelessly open fire on Jason and the mostly innocent kid, shoving a guy out of the helicopter for pointing out the potential for collateral damage. Which is, of course, what the sheriff wants anyway. Upshot for the audience is that we get this issue's first good bit of oddly beautifully illustrated gore. Jason then comes in to mercy kill the poor guy who is just pushed to his near death. It's a little bad when the mercy killing comes from the actual uncontested villain of the comic. Sheriff demands the pilot swing around to get another shot and reveals he's not aiming at Jason when it's pointed out that one shot won't kill the undead murderer anyway. But before the pilot can process this revelation, his dead buddy's head is thrown into the cockpit.
You said cockpit and head. That means balls and dick jokes.
You're not even supposed to be here today. The broken glass gets in the pilot's eyes and causes a crash, with the sheriff falling from the helicopter just before it crashes to the ground in a fiery explosion. Davy is concerned by the attention this will draw and suggests they go hide in some nearby caves. After they walk away, the sheriff pulls himself up menacingly. Okay, so we all know drugs can kill you pretty easily, but apparently they can also go in the other direction and make you shockingly durable. We switch to Jason and Davy in the cave, watching the National Guard look for them. Davy begs Jason to stay in the cave where it's safe, only to back into the creepy, murderous sheriff. Alright, you would think that they would notice him coming through that rather small cave opening, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you'd think, huh?
But you... How?
I don't know.
Alright, well, since you're here, do you want to help me finish the review?
Nah, this is your thing.
So what'd you come in here for?
For the soda. And to scare you a little bit.
So rude.
You're welcome!
Davy recognizes the sheriff as the person who murdered the counselors. Of course, the sheriff replies, "I'm the law. I don't murder nobody."
I am the law!
Quickly following up this oddly accurate double negative with a declaration that he's going to murder the child. Then we see Davy actually standing up for himself, stabbing the sheriff in the leg before sassing him and pushing him into a ravine. If the sheriff survives this, I quit. So the sheriff survives this. Okay, actually, I should probably finish this. We see the sheriff in the bottom of a hole in the cave, struggling to find and light his lighter, only to be met with the sight of actual spiders, instead of the imaginary ones he's kept feeling on him because of his drug habit.
You shouldn't do drugs. If you do them, you're bad. Because drugs are bad, okay? It's a bad thing to do drugs, so don't be bad.
Back to Davy and Jason. Jason has stepped outside and is being fired at by the National Guard. This, of course, essentially does nothing, but apparently no one told Davy that his mentor is immortal, as he comes out screaming for them to stop, causing the men to call for a ceasefire. Davy kneels down over Jason's prone body, begging him not to be dead, only to be ambushed by the sheriff, who tells them that he'll be with his friend soon, in a very graphic way. The sheriff notices the soldiers around him and tries to act cool, saying he's going to take the kid home. Obviously, none of them buy it and keep their guns trained on him, at which point he screams about being the law and throws rather ironic accusations of drug use out. Nothing screams, "I'm not a murderer," like threatening murder, accusing the police of being on drugs, and screaming about being the law. Frickin' white people. We see why the soldiers are staring as Jason rears up behind the sheriff. Finally, karma comes for him, in the form of a crazed murderer, but karma nonetheless, as Jason grabs him hard enough to break bones, is unfazed by a knife to the neck, and pulls them both off the cliff to fall to their presumable deaths below. The sheriff gets caught on a tree, and in another well-drawn bit of gore, his intestines fall out as he's ripped in half by the force of his fall. The ending scene starts on visuals of the sheriff hanging from a tree branch by his insides, and the soldiers trying to decide who cuts him down, before they go off to find Jason. As Davy reflects on how his summer was exciting and challenging and scary, and just like summer camp is supposed to be, as Jason's mask hangs ominously in the last panel on the page. The soldiers escorting Davy home talk about how traumatized he must be as our little future serial killer ruminates on how sometimes mass murder is just a fact of life when you're like him and Jason. And the closing image of the comic reveals a still-alive Jason lurking behind his mother's grave, as Davy cements his status as a future murderer with a warning to all you assholes out there. Alright, I'm done with the review.
What'd you do for an outro?
What's an outro?
Are you fucking kidding me? Move.
Rude.
Okay, this comic is actually pretty good. The art is great. The story is cliche, but it's what you expect for a Friday the 13th comic. And it's kind of good to see a story focusing on a different character outside of Jason. And I personally would like to see more of Davy in future comics. That being said, join me next week when we do a double review where I take a look at Skate Man, yay, and Into the Spider-Verse. I'm your superhero critic, and I'll stay super as long as you stay awesome. That's an outro!